The Mall Mommy by Chica DeLuna. I remember the day I got lost in the mall. I was only 6 at the time. I'm 36 now with a wife and 3 kids. And you'd think I'd have forgotten all about the childhood incident. But some things, they just scar you for life. It doesn't matter how old you grow or how many responsibilities you heap on your shoulders. The nightmares you experience in childhood are the ones that affect you the most. Because you'll never forget how small and insignificant they made you feel at the time. I've never been back to the mall. Not since I was 6 years old. And I won't let my kids so much as set foot in one either. My wife, May. Well, she's used to my eccentricities by now, but in the beginning, she couldn't figure it out. And it seemed at times that we were doomed to break up based on that issue alone. So one day, just for the sake of our relationship, I sat her down and told her about that day long ago, when I was 6 years old, and I got lost in the mall. I hated the cinema, I'll tell you that right off the bat. I hated the entire mall, but I hated the cinema most of all. It sat right on the topmost level. It was the smallest of the mall's 5 levels, and there was just enough room for a fast food place on one side of the escalator, and a cinema on the other. That was it. If you looked through the railings on the 5th level, you could see all the other levels below. You could see all the way down to the ground floor of the mall. And it was like a 1,000-foot drop to my 6-year-old little eyes. I imagined if someone took a tumble over those railings, they would fall for a week, at least. The mall was as big as a city block as far as I was concerned. There were people filling it, maybe millions, maybe more. And they were rushing around making this weird buzzing noise that only translated into actual words when they passed really close to me. People would sometimes smile at me as they walked past, but mostly everyone just looked hot and bothered. And if they had kids with them, those kids were likely to look hot and bothered too. I hated them all. I hated the hustle and bustle. It scared me. It scared me to death that I would become separated from my mother. And then I'd have to find a mall cop to help me find her. Mom told me that I wasn't to talk to anyone, no matter how friendly they looked. I wondered why I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone else. Were they dangerous? Would they kidnap me? Was everyone in the whole world a kidnapper? Well, everyone except mall cops. Mall cops would help me find my mommy again. All this advice gave the mall an extra dimension of threat. I developed an unhealthy paranoia as I clutched my mom's hands and peered fretfully around at strangers rushing past. My mom's hand was a lifeline in a raging sea of potential kidnappers. One wrong move and I'd be snatched up and carried off, never to be seen again. Mom was pretty relentless in her shopping. She surged along, dragging me behind her, and people made way for her without really thinking about it. She had a formidable presence, a rolling momentum, a consumer chi that she built up all week long and then released it in a sudden blind splurge every Saturday afternoon when she would hit the mall. With our shopping all done, we would inevitably end up at the topmost level, eating fries and greasy burgers opposite the movie theater. And as much as I enjoyed the fast food, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the cavernous entrance to the cinema. It was sinister. There were these huge glass doors that always stood open, but you couldn't see too far beyond them. Everything was dark and red-tinged. And there was the suggestion kiosk way in the back of the darkness, but you couldn't really make it out. And just outside of the entrance were all these posters advertising movies that I was too young to see. I used to sit munching on my fries just staring at the cinema, not daring to take my eyes off of it because I was convinced that there would be all manners of ghosts and boogeymen lurking in the dark cavity beyond the doors, watching me, waiting for that single moment when I grew careless and glanced away, and then they'd have me. By God, they could move in a twinkling, they could move in the blink of an eye, grabbing me out of my seat and hauling me off to the cinema before I could even draw a breath to scream. Mom wouldn't notice I was gone. Not until she finished the current chapter of the romance novel she was reading. And by then, it would be too late. I would have been swallowed by whatever monster festered in the bowels of that movie theater. I hardly ever saw anybody come out of that cinema, or go into it. The people who made it into that mall were more interested in food than entertainment. The burger place was always busy, but the cinema was silent, hungry, and resentful, watching me with its red-tinged mouth stretched open wide, and whispering to me, "Hey, Jeremy, come on over here, little man. Come see what the grown-up films are. Come see all the good stuff. Your mom won't notice you're gone. You'll be back before she even misses you. Come on over, Jeremy. Come see all the stuff they won't let you see at home." I wasn't tempted for a second. I knew that voice. It was the same voice that came creeping out of my closet when I was alone at night, or whispered at me from under the bed. Every 6-year-old knows that voice, but unlike other 6-year-olds, I knew where the boogeyman really lived. I found his eternal nest, and it was at the cinema at the very top of the mall. I dreaded that place. I had nightmares about that place. I was an only child and Mom pretty much had no choice but to take me to the mall with her. I used to kick up a fuss. I used to cry and throw tantrums and plead with her not to take me. Until, eventually, she'd bribe me with the promise to buy me something new from the toy shop if I was a good little soldier. And I gave her my word I'd behave. So, I gave her my word. Because in a kid's mind, a brand new toy outweighs all manner of evil. And I went along with her. And I was a good little soldier. So, she rewarded me by buying me a toy. And that's the way it went. Until one day, when everything changed. Mom was particularly flustered that day. She had a fight with Dad earlier in the day, and he slashed her shopping budget, as I would later learn. So she was particularly crabby. No hint of, "Jeremy, be a good boy and I'll buy you a toy." It was basically, "Jeremy, behave or I'll give you the spanking of a lifetime." She was wearing her blue nail polish. Somehow, I had worked out in my head that Mom's mood corresponded with the color of nail polish she wore. Red meant that she was at her most generous, green meant she was in a hyper-busy mood and had no time for nonsense, and blue meant she was mad as hell and you'd better watch out. Today was a blue nail polish day. We were on a whirlwind tour of the shops, working our way up to the topmost level like we usually did. I was scuttling after Mom, my short legs doing their best to keep pace with her. She wasn't holding my hand today. She had too many shopping bags and was trying to steer the cart at the same time, so I was pretty much just expected to keep up with her. And I did a pretty good job until we reached the 3rd level. That was the level with the toy shop. I knew Mom was in a bad mood, so I didn't dare ask her if she was going to buy me a toy. But when we swept past the toy shop on the way to the supermarket, she showed no signs of slowing down, and I couldn't help but feel the pang of deep longing. My head twisted around on my shoulders, my eyes invariably drawn to the shop. My feet were slowing down and faltering. Oh my God. They had the new Transformer figures in the display windows, lined up like artifacts from another dimension. All the Autobots were there. Optimus Prime, Sideswipe, Sunstreaker, Hound, Prowl, Mirage, Wheeljack, Racket, Ironhide, Bumblebee, Brawn, Huffer, Cliffjumper, Bluestreak. All of them were there. I was overwhelmed by this sudden avalanche of stimulus. My 6-year-old brain in slow orgasmic meltdown, and I glanced back briefly at Mom. She was heading straight toward the supermarket. I knew where she was. I could catch up with her at any time I liked. All I wanted to do was stand in front of that display window and bask in the glory that was the Hasbro 1985 Transformer toy line. I mean, they were practically 2 toys in one. I stared myself dizzy, absorbing every detail of the toys. My face squashed up against the window so hard, I practically turned my nose inside out. And I still couldn't get enough. I wanted to touch them, stroke them, coo over them. If only I could somehow reach through that glass and pick one up, just to hold it for a second. I swore that I would work in a toy shop when I grew up. There'd never be a barrier between me and my favorite toys. I could play with them all day long, and the shop would even let me take them home at night. It was the perfect job, right up there with Sweet Shop owner. Hey Jeremy, you want to come play with us? I turned around straight away and I noticed this kid. He was standing close to me, smiling in a friendly enough kind of way. He had tousled brown hair and he was a little taller than me. He was wearing an Empire Strikes Back t-shirt. The kind of promotional t-shirt that you could get in the foyer of any cinema when the movie was out. You want to play? He inquired. I shook my head. I'm with my mom. That's too bad, the kid said as he wiped his nose with his sleeve. We got all the new Transformer toys. We got them before they even came out in shops. My friend's dad works at the place where they make them, so he gets all the latest stuff. I was instantly entranced. Which ones have you got? I asked. All of them. Autobots, Decepticons, Dinobots. We even got GoBots. GoBots are kind of crappy, I said. The kid laughed. Yeah, he said. We hardly ever play with them. You want to come see what else we got? I grew doubtful again. I turned to look in the direction of the supermarket in which my mom had vanished. As if reading my mind, the kid said, Come on, we'll be back before your mom even knows you're gone. I frowned. The kid gave me this look, like I was a scaredy cat or something. You want to see the toys, right? He demanded. I nodded. So come on. I drifted after him. It was all kind of a daze. All I could think of were those Transformer toys. The kid said he had them all, even the Dinobots, which were pretty hard to come by around our way. I was hooked on that promise. I kept telling myself that I would be super quick. Just one peek at the kid's toys, and then I would be back by my mom's side before she even knew that I was gone. It was the perfect plan, as far as my 6-year-old mind was concerned. It never occurred to me to ask where the kid kept all of his toys. I naturally assumed that he just lived in the mall with his folks. I had come to that conclusion long ago, that people actually lived in the mall and did their shopping there every day, and that the staff lived in all these little houses behind the shops they worked in, and that's why they always disappeared through the back doors when no one else was allowed to go through. I felt pretty honored that this kid was letting me see where he lived. I had secretly been aching to see one of those small little mall houses. I knew they were hidden everywhere. He kept chatting to me about various toys that he had. He chatted really fast and he was funny. He made me smile a lot. And he had a real easy way about him. I guess you could say, but still. At the back of my mind was this nagging feeling that something just wasn't right. Where are your parents? I asked the kid. Do you live with them? No. He laughed as though it had been obvious. I'm a mall kid. I was intrigued by the phrase. A mall kid? What's that? He shrugged and said, We're everywhere. All the places grown-ups don't care to look. He swept his arm around as to suggest that I should just go and take a look for myself. I glanced around wondering what he was on about, and the first thing I saw was nothing. Just people dashing about the way as they always did. But slowly, inexorably, I saw them, like mirages appearing out of the sweltering heat of a desert. It was just like the kid said, the children were everywhere. I just never noticed them before. Small kids and older kids, hanging out in ones and twos in much larger groups, scampering around playing tag, racing each other up and down the escalators, or squatting in the display windows and making ridiculous faces at adults passing by. And there were others, shallow-faced kids lurking in the alleys between the shops, and they were all staring at me. They were smiling. I smiled back, but I was a little bit spooked. I couldn't figure out where all the kids had come from. I had never noticed them before. And they weren't with their parents. At least, not as far as I could see. But they looked like regular kids, not the kind that would run away from home or something. Mall kids have the best life, the kid told me. They get all the best stuff, no parents to worry about, stay up as late as you want, watch all the grown-up movies. It's like your birthday every day. I was pretty impressed when I heard this. I thought that it would be a mighty fine thing if I became a mall kid too. So I went ahead and asked, how do you become a mall kid? In the hope that becoming a mall kid was easy and didn't require any tests. You have to lose your parents, the kid said as a matter of factly. You hide until your parents stop looking for you, and after that, you come out to play every day. It's as simple as that, really. But where can I hide? Oh, the mall mommy will help you hide. She looks after all the kids. She's very nice. She gives us presents and makes up games for us to play. She throws us birthday parties all the time. She's not like a mommy at all. She's more like your best friend ever. I was intrigued. Where does she live? I asked. Oh, I'll show you, the kid said. She's not far away. She'll probably give you a present. She loves meeting new kids. I was pleased to hear this. I hurried to keep up with the kid, still staring at all the children around me, wondering how I could have possibly missed them all this time. There were so many of them. The younger ones chasing around playing tag and jumping on each other. The older ones taking turns talking to each other in muted tones, staring at me, smiling. What's your name? I asked the kid. Dave, said the kid. I'm 7. How old are you? 6, I said. You're quite big for 6, said Dave. I thought you were at least 7 or 8. I realized he was just trying to flatter me, but I believed Dave and I swelled with a little pride, thinking I could easily pass for 8, that I was old enough to be a mall kid. We were heading across the 3rd level concourse, past the food stands and the promotional booths, and where the crowds were everywhere, queuing up for social offers and free product samples. And there were people sitting in alfresco restaurants, families, couples, and the odd loner, and even sitting and eating. They all looked like they were in a hurry, like they wanted nothing better than to hurl themselves back into the fray, to get that last must-have item before someone else got it first. But, strangely enough, the mall kids seemed to exist on their own reality. None of the grown-ups paid any attention to them. Even when they were racing in and amongst them, nobody seemed bothered that the kids were everywhere. No adult keeping them under control. No one even seemed to notice them. The kids just laughing and hooting swept around the grown-ups, flowed between them in a way I can't describe. The way a river flows between rocks. The way air flows between the tangled branches in a forest. Even today, I can't really describe the phenomenon. The children didn't collide with the shoppers. They simply bent around them. Not physically, not tangibly, but in a way that baffled the senses. It was as though reality itself was bending and warping, as though the shoppers were printed on one strip of film and the mall kids were printed on another. And although the two strips were running side by side with each other, they were never really interacting. We were moving up the escalator to the 4th floor. There were kids staring at me as they rode down the escalator. Some of them waved and smiled, prompting me to wave back. I felt good. I felt like the other kids had already accepted me as one of their own. And to an only child, this was immensely important. I was going to be a mall kid. I was going to have birthday parties every day. Wouldn't that be a fine thing? I think I felt twinges of doubt as I moved further and further away from my mother. But I can't remember anymore. It was so long ago, and sometimes I recall things one way, and sometimes I remember them a totally different way. But I do remember that kid, Dave, talking the whole way, telling me how great life was as a mall kid, how there were no school lessons or tests or boring homework, or how you could watch TV through the shops because they were always open and always on display. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of channels, including 24-hour cartoon channels. I watched as a couple of mall kids slid down the handrails of the opposite escalator, laughing and shrieking as they went. I was amazed how everyone ignored them. Usually, grown-ups got really mad when kids fooled around like that. But these kids, they seemed to be able to do whatever they wanted. I was excited. I wanted to join in. I wanted to slide from all the way to the top of the escalator to the bottom, or ride the mall train for free, or even steal those cupcakes with the icing that they sold on the first floor. The world was filled with this sudden and unexpected possibilities. To be a mall kid, I thought, must be the best thing in the world. Way better than working in a candy shop or even a toy shop. Because when you were a mall kid, you didn't even have to work at all. You got all your candies and toys for free. We changed escalators and we were headed up towards the 5th floor, the highest level in the mall. And that's when I started having some serious doubts. "Hey," I said, "where are we going?" "To see the mall mommy," Dave said as it was no big thing. "Hey, you should see this place around Christmas," he declared. "Santa Claus is here. And there are so many presents you can't even open them all before next Christmas comes around." "Where's the mall mommy?" I asked. Dave shrugged. "In the cinema," he said. "She's waiting for you. She's really excited to see you, Jeremy. She's got a Transformer toy, just for you. One of the newest." But the euphoria was wearing off, to be replaced by a deep, nagging fear. I didn't want to go into the cinema, not for any number of Transformer toys. I told Dave this. I told him I wasn't going into the cinema because my mommy would get angry. But he just laughed and said that I was being silly. That the mall mommy would be my new mommy. That she was the best mommy a kid could ever ask for. I said that may be true, but I still wanted to go back to my real mommy, because she was going to be mad at me if I went up to the cinema on my own. "But you're not on your own, are you, Jeremy?" Dave said. "You're with me." He gave me a disappointed look. "Don't you want to be a mall kid?" "Sure I do," I said. But even as I said this, I was peering up the escalator with little wings of dreadful fluttering around in my heart. It could have been my imagination, but it seemed like the higher we traveled, the dimmer the light was getting, and a deep chill was growing in the air. I turned and peered down the escalator. I was startled to see dozens of mall kids standing on the escalator behind me, blocking my escape route, and smiling up at me. "You'll see," Dave was saying. "The mall mommy looks after all the kids who get lost in the mall." "I'm not lost," I insisted. Dave glared down at me, and I noticed his eyes were glowing as bright as sun-dazzled pennies. "Yes, you are," he said. "You're like us, Jeremy. You don't have parents anymore. They searched for you for days, but they couldn't find you, so they gave up. They had a new child. They moved on. Now you're a lost kid, a dead kid, a forgotten kid, and only the mall mommy loves you." "You're lying," I shouted. "I know where my mommy is, and she's going to come back to look for me if I don't get back real soon." I started to turn down the escalator, but Dave reached out and grabbed me by the arm. His fingers were cold and sharp, and they pierced my skin like 1,000 little glass shards. "Come and meet the mall mommy," he said. His voice had changed. It sounded like syrupy and thick, not at all like the voice of a little boy. Turning around, I was horrified to see Dave's features shimmering and melting, allowing me to glimpse for a moment of something dark and rotten hiding beneath the skin. "Let me go!" I cried. He tightened his grip. "The mall mommy has so many gifts for you," he hissed at me. "She's the only mommy you'll ever need, Jeremy." "She's not my mommy," I screamed and struggled with him. "I don't want to meet her. Let me go." But the kids behind me were whispering, She wants to meet you, Jeremy. She's such a good mommy. She's the best mommy. The best mommy. Dave was dragging me the rest of the way up the escalator. The very best mommy a boy could ever have. Staring past him, I saw the top of the escalator was swimming in darkness, so gloomy that I could barely see the cinema or the fast food restaurant. But I could sense something up there, waiting for me. It gave off waves of malice and corruption. A sense of slow crawling evil that sucked all the light and the warmth right out of the air. I moaned in terror. I felt sluggish and disconnected. The way I felt when I was caught in the treacle-thick folds of a nightmare. The entire mall was concentrated into a capstone of darkness that swelled and billowed above me. The lights of the cinema were still glowing through the gloom. The burger restaurant displayed all its brand colors, yellow and blue, in broad fluorescent strips, but everything else was lost in those pungent, clawing shadows. "Please, let me go," I sobbed. "Please." We'd reached the top of the escalator by this time. Dave was hauling me towards the yawing mouth of the cinema, and I was fighting and screaming to let me go, but the whole place was deserted. There weren't any grown-ups here, and the other mall kids were crowding around me, whispering, "She loves you, Jeremy. She wants to play with you. She wants to play with you forever." Oh dear God, even today I struggle with the memory of it. That soupy feeling of absolute horror. The air grainy as a black and white picture, drained of all life and vitality, and the gloom giving way to an abysmal darkness that yawed through those open doors of the cinema. A darkness so complete that it can only be found at the back of a child's closet or under his bed. And out of the darkness, the most dreadful voice issued. The most syrupy, cloying imitation of a mother's voice. And even to my untoward ears, it was just a grotesque travesty. "Come to me, Jeremy." The voice oozed around me like warm waves of licorice. "I've watched you for so long, dear child, sitting and eating with your mother, never coming to visit. I've longed for you to come and visit me. I have such gifts to give you, such joys to behold, such movies to watch back here in the dark. Come, sweet boy. Don't fight. Don't struggle. Mommy will take care of everything." But I did struggle. I did fight. I bit too and spat and screamed myself blue. But Dave was stronger than me, and the cinema kept creeping closer. Its doors cracked open sideways like the smile of a dead man, the darkness festering beyond it. Infinitely dark. There would be no returning to the light once I was dragged into that. No memory of the light. Just the mall mommy's fingers creeping over my flesh, and her crooning voice over me like waves of putrid breath. "That's it, Jeremy. Just a little closer, and then all your worries will be behind you. Oh, dear child, how I've longed to hold you in my arms." The thought of that monstrosity holding me in her arms proved too much for me. I reached up in the extremes of terror and jabbed my finger into David's left eye as hard as I could. He shrieked in pain and reeled away from me, his hands clutching his face. Suddenly, I was free. Instantly, I turned and raced back down towards the escalator, unnerved by the shrieks of their leader. The other mall kids flinched away from me as I belted past, and for an instant, I saw that they were no longer fresh-faced young kids. Their skin had become green and patchy, like rotting flesh. Their eyes were milky and gray. Their lips had been eaten away by corruption, just to reveal yellowing teeth and gaping sockets. I barely had time to register this information. I was barreling toward the down escalator as fast as my short little legs would carry me. But slow. Too slow. Too slow. Behind me, the mall mommy was screaming with rage, and her voice was dreadful to hear.
"Come back here, you brat! Don't you dare make me come after you! I swear you'll regret it if I do!"
I turned to see half of the mall kids scurrying down the escalator after me like a swarm of rats. And this sight so frightened me that I scrambled up onto the handrail of the escalator, straddling it and holding on tight for a moment. Before letting go, I slid faster than I expected, my head filled with noise and confusion at the echoing screams of the mall mommy.
"You're in for it now,"
she shrieked.
"You've done it now, you little bastard. I'm coming for you now, and I swear I won't be sparing the rod."
I reached the bottom of the escalator and glanced up. The mall kids were sliding down the handrails after me. I knew I had only gained a tiny head start, so I turned and slid all the way down the second escalator. And when I reached the third level of the mall, I tore across the concourse as though the hounds of hell were after me. I shrieked and howled, and you'd have expected everyone to pay attention to a little kid shrieking and howling in the middle of a shopping mall. But no one paid the slightest bit of attention to me. Maybe they were blind to me. Maybe I had somehow slipped into the mall kids' half-world, and that's why no one could see me. I like to think that that's the reason people ignored me that day. That they couldn't physically see me. That I was somehow invisible to them. Because the other explanation, the more rational explanation, scares me even worse. That no one cared. That everyone was too busy going after that must-have last-minute bargain to spare a thought for some little kid in trouble. The mall kids were pursuing me through the crowds, and I changed directions as I ran, but they appeared ahead of me and all around, leering at me between gaps in the adult herd. And they all looked like corpses now. Little, dead corpses. Bloated and rotting with eyes sunk deep into their skulls. "Come back, you little bastard," they hissed. "Come back with us at once. You've made Mommy angry. You're in so much trouble. You may as well come back now. You're only making things worse for yourself." At last, I saw a mall cop, a tall, thin black man in a peaked cap, smiling at everyone left and right as he sauntered towards me. I ran straight up to him, howling and wailing, clutching his sleeve, and to my immense relief, he crouched down and asked me what was wrong. That had I lost my mommy or something? No worries. He could send out an announcement and she would know where I was. I remember the sound of his voice, so calm and soothing. I can even remember the smell of his cologne. I remember it more clearly than my own father's, because I had been invisible. I had been dead. And it was like the mall cop reached down into my death-like state and snatched me out. "It's okay, little guy," he said. He started speaking into his walkie-talkie. "We're fetching your mommy now." But I wouldn't let go of his arm. I clung to it, still sobbing and wailing and peering all around me. And to my immense relief, I saw the mall kids were fading away. I could still see them, but they had become more indistinct. Like shadows now, silhouettes creeping around. And then, after a time, I couldn't see him at all. "Here you go," said the mall cop. "Here's your mom now." Mom came up to us. She looked furious. She was glaring at me like she wouldn't mind throttling me right then and there. And her mood only got worse when the mall cop started lecturing her on the dangers of letting me out of her sight. The mall cop looked old enough to be my mom's dad, and he had a very paternal way about him that stopped Mom in her tracks. She stared resentfully at him, but she listened quietly. I could see her hands clenching and unclenching and her jawline tightening. She was forcing herself not to retort to him. I stared down at Mom's hand. I watched them clenching and unclenching. She was wearing yellow nail polish. I frowned. I had never known my mom to wear yellow nail polish before. Last time I had seen her, she was wearing blue nail polish. I tugged on the mall cop's arm and he kept talking. I tugged harder. "Excuse me," I said. He glanced down at me. "That's not my mom," I said. "What's that?" The mall cop blinked at me. "She's not my mom," I said again. "Oh, for goodness sake," Mom snapped. "I've had enough of this." She reached out to take me by the arm. "Come on, Jeremy, your dad's waiting for you." The mall cop stepped between us. "Hang on," he said. "Can I see some ID, ma'am?" Mom just glared at him. "Are you kidding?" she snapped. "I'm his mom. His name's Jeremy. That ought to be enough for you." "He says you're not his mom," the mall cop said. "So, I'm really gonna need to see some ID, ma'am." "He's messing around," Mom exploded. "Of course I'm his mom." She tried to get around the mall cop, but he stepped between us. "He doesn't look like he's messing around, ma'am." The kid looked scared. "Are you gonna let me take my son, or am I gonna have to call the police?" "Yeah, you know what? I think we should call the police, ma'am. I think that's exactly what we need to do." He raised his walkie-talkie to his lips, but Mom was already beating her retreat. She glared at the mall cop with rage and hatred in her eyes. She actually snarled at him, like a dog. But she was moving backwards, melting into the crowd. And just out of spite, just before she disappeared, the mall mommy turned to me and showed me her true face. I don't think I'll ever forget the nightmare she revealed to me. I wet my bed for 3 years after that. Mom's features melted away to reveal a face that was a cavernous ruin. Eyes were swimming in sockets filled with writhing and squirming roaches and worms, suddenly erupted forth and scuttled across Mall Mommy's face, like a living scar. She had no lower jaw. Her whole face ended with the top row of her teeth protruding out of her face like fangs. She glared at me, and I still couldn't get that look of utter hatred out of my head. It's haunted me since childhood. "I'm coming for you," she whispered directly into my ear. "After your mommy tucks you in bed at night, after she's switched off the light, after she's closed the door, oh Jeremy, that's when I'll be creeping up from beneath your bed. You'll hear me calling your name right before I rip the beating heart out of your chest." And then she was gone. My real mom found me not too long afterwards. I ran straight up to her, right into her arms, and I wouldn't let go. The mall cop didn't give her a lecture like he gave the mall mommy. I think he was kind of troubled by the whole incident. He kept glancing in the direction the mall mommy had vanished, like he was trying to work it out in his head. That was the last time I ever set foot in a mall. Mom didn't push me on the issue. She knew something had happened that day, but it took years before she could even pry the story out of me. But every time I hear a kid is missing, I get wondering whether it was a runaway kid or whether something reached out and snatched it into the darkness that swells and congeals just beyond the rim of everyday perception. The darkness that every kid knows about, that gathers at the thickest at the back of the closet or under the bed and hides in the face of every conceivable nightmare. And sometimes, when you least expect it, those nightmares, they do come true. I'll tell you guys one thing. When I first heard this story, it really fucking creeped me out. Dr. CreepSin read it, and he did a fantastic job. I don't know if I did it justice, but I sure as shit did try. I would like to thank my $10 and above patrons: Dan R., Paul Z., Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, and Ethan A. Guys, if you want your name read off at the end of every video, head over to Patreon and join at the $5 or above tier. And if you want to suggest some Patreon-only content, please let me know, because I don't even know where to begin. So I want to know what you guys want. And as always, thank you so much for watching, supporting the channel, watching the monthly live stream, all that shit. I really appreciate it. This channel has been a slow growth, but we're definitely getting there. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention this in the actual recording of the story, which is why the audio sounds different now. It's still me, CreepSin. Hello. Chica de Luna has a lot of books for sale, and they're all just as good, if not better, than this story. I know I picked up a couple of them. They're pretty cheap. They're like $2-3 a piece. So you make sure you go pick up your own Chica de Luna story too, right now. Right this very second. Go get it.